Do you ever feel like you're putting in all the work, but you're just not seeing the results fast enough? It's that frustrating feeling that your dreams are right there, just out of reach, because progress is so painfully slow. It's a feeling that can curdle into doubt. It makes you question every single step you take. It whispers that your efforts are pointless, that you're just wasting your time on a path that leads nowhere. We live in a world that celebrates the overnight success, the viral sensation, the lightning-fast victory. We're conditioned to expect instant gratification, a world where anything we want is just a click away. This constant exposure to everyone else's highlight reels can make our own journey feel small, our own progress invisible. It breeds a deep, gnawing impatience that can be the most toxic poison to our ambitions. But what if I told you that the secret to achieving everything you truly desire, the key to building something that lasts, is hidden in the very thing we all struggle with the most? What if the path to your ultimate dream isn't about speed, but about endurance? What if the greatest power you could ever cultivate is the power of patience? This is a story about a young man named Kyle, who, like a lot of us, was burning with ambition. He lived in a small, sleepy village nestled in the shadow of a great mountain. A village known for one thing: the exceptional quality of its forged steel. From a simple farmer's scythe to a knight's ornate sword, the metalwork from this village was legendary. And Kale, more than anything, wanted to be a part of that legend. His dream wasn't just to be a blacksmith, it was to be the greatest swordsmith the kingdom had ever known. He pictured himself creating blades of impossible sharpness and strength, swords that would become legends themselves. He saw his path to that dream through the doors of one specific workshop, the most revered in the village. It belonged to an old master smith named Alara. She was an enigma. Her face was a roadmap of wrinkles, but her hands were steady and sure, capable of taming the violent dance of fire and steel with an almost otherworldly grace. Her creations weren't just tools or weapons. They were works of art, each one with a life of its own. To be her apprentice was the highest honor. And after months of pleading, of showing up at her forge at dawn and staying long after dusk, just watching and learning, Ilara finally gave in. Kale's heart soared. He believed his journey had finally begun. He had no idea, though, that his first and hardest test would have nothing to do with a hammer or an anvil. "Master," he began, trying to hide his disappointment, "are these the only buckets? They seem flawed. I could repair them or maybe build a cart to be more efficient." Alara turned to him, her dark eyes seeming to peer right into his soul. "You will not repair them. You will not build a cart. You will use these buckets just as they are. The forge has its needs. Your task is to provide. Now go." And so Kale's training began, not with the fire of the forge, but with the cold, damp wood of leaky buckets. The path to the spring wasn't easy. It was a treacherous, winding trail up the lower slope of the mountain, riddled with loose rocks and slippery roots. The first few trips were pure frustration. The buckets were deceptively heavy, and the leaks were worse than he'd imagined. Ice-cold water trickled down the sides, soaking his pants and turning the path into a muddy hazard. By the time he got back to the forge, nearly a third of the water was gone, leaving a dark, wet trail behind him. He emptied the meager amount into the trough and turned around to do it all over again. The first month passed in a blur of aching muscles and wet clothes. Kyle pushed through, telling himself this was a test of his dedication. This was his trial by water before he could face the trial by fire. He learned the trail, memorizing every treacherous root and loose stone. He got quicker, more agile, but the task never changed. The buckets still leaked, and his work still felt monumentally inefficient. By the third month, resentment had started to grow. He'd hear the proud, rhythmic clang of hammers from other forges as he trudged past, his clothes damp, his hands raw. Other apprentices, boys he grew up with, were learning the real craft. They were shaping steel. In the evenings, they'd talk a language he desperately wanted to understand, a language of carbon content and quenching temperatures. When they asked what Ilara was teaching him, a hot flush of shame would creep up his neck. "She is teaching me the fundamentals," he'd mumble, the lie tasting like ash. What could he say? That the greatest blacksmith in the kingdom had him fetching water in leaky buckets? The seasons turned, each bringing a new kind of misery. In the scorching summer, the path was dusty and draining. In the autumn, fallen leaves hid the dangers, and he twisted his ankle twice. But winter tested his limits. The path became a river of ice. The water leaking from his buckets would freeze almost instantly, creating new hazards with every trip. He had to move with inhuman focus, his body clenched against the cold and the constant threat of a fall. More than once, he slipped, the impact jarring his whole body, the precious water spilling out and freezing into a glassy sheet. He'd lie there, the cold seeping into his bones, feeling utterly futile. How could this endless, meaningless suffering possibly lead to his dream? He started to lose weight. Dark circles formed under his eyes. The fire of his ambition had been reduced to a smoldering ember of resentment. His dream now felt like it belonged to another life. This was his reality: the cold, the wet, the ache in his back, and the deafening silence of his master. After nearly a year, Kale finally snapped. He slammed the empty buckets down, the wood cracking under his anger. Ilara was inside, inspecting a finished blade, her focus absolute. She didn't look up. "Master," Kale's voice was tight, "I have to talk to you." She slowly placed the blade down and faced him, her expression unreadable. "I have been your apprentice for a full year," he started, the words tumbling out. "For 365 days, I've done nothing but carry water in these useless, leaking buckets. I haven't touched a hammer. I haven't stood before the fire. I haven't learned a single thing about forging steel. Meanwhile, other boys are already making knives and tools. They're learning. What am I doing? What is the point of this torture?" Ilara was silent for a long moment. "The mountain has more to teach you, Kale," she said finally, her voice calm. "Be patient." "Be patient?" Kale laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I have been patient. I've been drenched in summer and frozen in winter. I've been mocked by other apprentices and pitied by villagers. I've given you a year of my life, and you tell me to be patient. Teach me something, or just tell me I'm wasting my time so I can leave." Ilara's eyes seemed to harden. "If you believe you're wasting your time, then you are free to leave," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more force than a hammer blow. "No one is forcing you to stay." The finality in her voice stunned him. He expected her to argue, to explain. But this cold dismissal, this utter indifference to his year of service, was devastating. Defeated and humiliated, he stormed out. He didn't leave that day. The shame of returning to his family a failure was too great. But a cold knot of rebellion settled in his heart. Months passed. Kale continued the work, but he was just going through the motions. He no longer saw it as a test. He saw it as a punishment, a cruel joke. He was a prisoner, and the daily trek was his sentence. If you've ever felt like Kale, trapped in a cycle of effort that feels meaningless, if you've ever been on the verge of giving up, let me know in the comments what kept you going. Your story, your struggle, your reason for pushing through might just be the motivation someone else needs to hear today. Another 6 months crawled by. A year and a half into his apprenticeship, Kale's hope was gone. He was a ghost haunting his own life, a shell of the ambitious young man who first walked into Ilara's forge. His body was lean and corded with muscle, but his eyes were empty. The breaking point came on a market day. A traveling merchant had set up a stall displaying goods from across the kingdom. Kale's gaze fell upon a sword lying on a bed of red velvet. It was a masterpiece. The steel was polished to a mirror finish, with an intricate pattern of waves flowing along the blade. "Ah, a connoisseur!" the merchant boomed. "That, my boy, is a blade from the capital's workshops. 100 folds, perfectly balanced." He placed the sword in Kyle's hands. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, a devastating despair washed over him. The weight was perfect, the balance sublime. It felt alive. This was his dream. This was everything he wanted to create. And it was an impossible fantasy. He was a water boy. He would never create something like this. He handed the sword back and walked away. He didn't go back to the forge. He walked up the familiar, hated path toward the mountain and sat on a boulder, the 2 leaky buckets discarded at his feet. For the first time in 18 months, he did not complete his duties. He had made his decision. He was leaving. He would pack his things and walk away, to the capital, to anywhere, and beg for a place at any forge that would let him touch steel. It was better than this slow death of the soul. That night, he crept back to the forge to leave a bitter note. He pushed the door open a crack and peered inside. Ilara was there, working. The fire roared. She was holding a bar of steel in the flames. She pulled it out, glowing like the sun, and laid it on the anvil. Then she picked up a heavy forging hammer. Kyle watched, his anger forgotten, replaced by fascination. He watched her raise the hammer, her small frame possessing an impossible strength. But it wasn't just strength, it was her stance. Feet planted wide, knees bent, back perfectly straight. She was rooted to the earth. When the hammer came down, it wasn't a crashing blow, but a controlled, powerful, and precise strike. It was a dance of fire, force, and grace. He watched for what felt like hours. In that moment, a tiny, confusing thought flickered in his mind. Her stance. It looked strangely, unnervingly familiar. Shaking the thought away, he stepped into the light. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice hoarse. Ilara turned, her face glistening with sweat. She showed no surprise. "I see." "No, you don't see," Kyle shot back. "You don't see the year and a half I've lost. I came here to learn how to make swords, not have my spirit broken carrying your water." "And you think you have learned nothing?" Ilara asked softly. "I've learned how to hate the sight of a bucket," he spat. Ilara gestured to a corner. "Before you go, do me one last service. Pick up that hammer." It was a raw forging hammer, huge and heavy. He scoffed. "Why? So you can mock me one last time?" "Pick it up," she commanded, a sliver of steel in her voice. Annoyed but curious, Kale walked over and wrapped his hands around the thick handle. He braced himself and lifted. A shock went through him. It was heavy but manageable. He swung it tentatively, and his body moved instinctively. His feet shifted into a wide, stable stance, His knees bent, his back straightened. He swung again, harder, and it moved in a smooth, controlled arc. It felt natural. He stood there, stunned. The image of Ilara at the anvil flashed in his mind. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Ilara's lips. "You wanted to forge steel, Kale," she said, her voice now filled with a warmth he'd never heard. "But I couldn't teach a boy to forge steel. Steel is unforgiving. It demands control, focus, and endurance that you didn't have. So first, I had to forge the smith." She tapped his forearms, which were like steel cables. "Every day, you balanced two heavy, sloshing buckets. You learned to use your core, your legs, your entire body to control an unstable weight. That gave you the foundation of the smith's stance." She pointed toward the door. "Every day, you walked a treacherous path. You learned to focus, to be aware of every loose stone. You didn't just walk the path, you became one with it. That forged your focus." She looked him directly in the eyes. "And the leaks, Kyle. The leaks were the most important lesson. Every day you performed a task that was frustrating and seemingly pointless. You fought monotony and resentment. That, Kale, was the true tempering. Forging a legendary blade is not a few hours of glorious work. It is thousands of hammer blows. It is the patience to fold the steel again and again, knowing a single lapse in focus can ruin weeks of work. You thought I was teaching you to carry water. I was teaching you perseverance. I was forging your patience." The words hit Kale with the force of a physical blow. The last 18 months replayed in his mind through a new lens. The aching muscles, the freezing cold, the frustration. It wasn't a punishment. It was a curriculum. He looked down at the hammer, at his own body, and finally at the old woman before him. He saw her not as a jailer, but as his truest teacher. Tears welled in Kale's eyes, tears of profound, earth-shattering realization. He dropped to his knees. "Master," he whispered, "forgive me." Ilara helped him up. "There's nothing to forgive. The lesson is complete. Your training, however, is about to begin. Come, the fire is hot." For the rest of the night, Kale stood before the forge as a smith. Ilara handed him a piece of steel. "Make a dagger, feel the steel, listen to it." Everything was now clear. His stance was perfect. His grip on the hammer was sure. His blows were precise, rhythmic, and powerful. He could stand the radiant heat for hours. When a fold didn't set right, the frustration was a distant echo, not a storm. He simply corrected the mistake, his mind calm. The process was a meditation he had been practicing for a year and a half without knowing it. The other apprentices would have watched in stunned silence, mistaking his hard-won discipline for natural talent. They wouldn't have seen the thousands of trips to the spring or the soul-crushing monotony. They would only see the result. By sunrise, he was finished. Lying on the anvil was a simple, unadorned dagger. But the blade was flawless. The edge was keen and true. He held it in his hand, the cool weight of the steel a reassuring presence. It was the first thing he had ever truly created. Years passed. Kale became Ilara's partner. His ambition, now tempered by a deep and abiding patience, allowed him to create swords that were not just sharp, but resilient. Not just beautiful, but alive. When Ilara finally passed, Kale was known as Master Kale, the greatest swordsmith of his generation. And one morning, a new apprentice, a young girl with fire in her eyes, arrived at his forge. Kale looked at her, saw the burning impatience he knew so well, and smiled. He pointed to a corner, where two old, weathered, and very leaky wooden buckets sat waiting. Kyle's story is a powerful reminder that true lasting success isn't built overnight. It's forged in the seemingly mundane, repetitive tasks we do day in and day out. Patience isn't passive waiting. It's not doing nothing. Patience is active. It is the strength to keep showing up, to keep putting in the work, and to trust the process, even when the results aren't visible yet. Each of us has a legendary sword we want to create, a business, a skill, a personal goal, and each of us has a leaky bucket. It's that task that feels tedious and pointless. It's the daily workout when you see no change in the mirror. It's the hours of study when the concepts still feel alien. It's the consistent effort at work when recognition feels miles away. It's easy to resent these tasks. But these challenges are often the forge itself, secretly shaping us and building the skills we need. The frustration you feel isn't a sign to quit. It's a sign that you are being tested, that you are growing. The pain of the process is what makes the achievement meaningful. So, what is your leaky bucket? What if, instead of fighting it, you embraced it? What if you saw it not as an obstacle, but as the training ground for your greatness? The strength, focus, and patience you need are not qualities you're born with. They are qualities you forge. They are built one drop, one step, one day at a time. Embrace the process. Trust that the quiet work you do matters. Stay steady, because the most profound transformations happen not in a flash of lightning, but in the slow, patient forging of a master. If this story resonated with you, give this video a like and subscribe for more content to help you build a life of strength and purpose. And click the screen to watch our next video on overcoming the fear of failure. Your journey to mastery is just beginning. Keep forging.